They said the King of England still smelled of death long before he actually died. By the winter of 1547, Henry VIII, once the most powerful man in Europe, was a rotting giant trapped inside his own body. He was only 55, but he looked closer to 80, the man who won split from the Pope, who had 6 wives, and who ruled with an iron will, could barely stand. His legs were swollen, ulcered, and oozing with pus. Courtiers had to stuff the room with herbs and rose petals to mask the stench. But even that couldn't drown out the truth. Henry was dying, and it wasn't going to be peaceful. He spent his final days in a fog of pain and rage. Servants trembled to approach him. The great king, once feared across nations, now lay in his chamber at Whitehall Palace, groaning in agony. Too weak to move, too proud to admit defeat, he refused to speak of death. No one dared mention it in his presence, because in his mind he was still Henry the Great, God's chosen ruler. But the doctors knew. The ulcers on his legs had turned black. Fever burned through his veins. His stomach had bloated grotesquely. He could no longer fit into his royal clothes, and the smell of decay clung to everything he touched. And then came the question everyone whispered behind closed doors. Had he confessed his sins? The man who destroyed monasteries, who executed wives and friends alike, had refused the last rites. When Bishop Cranmer was finally summoned, Henry was barely conscious. The bishop leaned close and whispered, "Your Majesty, do you trust in Christ and his mercy?" The king could no longer speak, but slowly, weakly, he squeezed Cranmer's hand. Once. It was the only answer he ever gave. That night, the torches in Whitehall burned low. The great monarch who had changed the course of England's history lay gasping for air. Those around him claimed they heard him call out for Jane Seymour, his third wife, the only one he ever truly loved. Some swore they saw him reaching for someone unseen. Others said he stared into the darkness, eyes wide, as if seeing every soul he had condemned. And then, just before dawn, the King of England was gone, but his death brought no peace. When his body was carried to Windsor to be buried beside Jane, the coffin cracked open along the way. Dark fluids leaked out. Witnesses said dogs followed the scent and licked the blood that spilled onto the floor. Even in death, Henry VIII could not rest. For the man who defied God, split his kingdom, and tore down everything that stood against him, met his end not on the battlefield or the throne, but alone, broken, and consumed by the rot he had unleashed on others.